All right, with that being said, last week we did talk about the millennial reign of Christ. We covered 1,000 years in one session. That was awesome. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the format of just kind of discussion and thoughts because there really isn't a whole lot in those 6 verses to tell us actually what that 1,000 years is going to be like. I did hear several good comments and questions and thoughts afterwards, and so sometimes, we got to a lot of them, but I can't remember who it was and what they said, but someone said a couple things that, oh, what do you think about this? And I thought, oh man, we should have talked about that, but we ran out of time. But before we move into tonight's verses, to cover 7 through 15, any questions or comments on the millennium? We're ending the millennium this session. All right, see how good that went last week?
Did we ever figure out what we're going to be doing?
No, we did not. So that's part of the good discussion. Most of our discussion is centered around who's going to be in the millennium, who's going to be on this earthly reign, and for sure we know the church is there because we reign with Christ and we're forever with Christ once we go be with Him. And every indication that includes all Old Testament saints and all that. So the saved through the years, and then of course Israel in their glorified bodies. Yes?
I do remember for a change where it was iron speed.
Yes. That'd be good.
It was, are we, when we return with Christ,
Yes.
do we still have a job to do witnessing to people and letting them know?
Very good. I don't remember that really entering into the question as far as our witness, our testimony during the millennium. It would be called for because we have, at the beginning, we have at least the 144,000, but they're already saved. All right, so we don't need to witness to those. If we understand that there's others that go into the millennial reign that would need to be witnessed to, then we may be a witness to them. However, we do know for sure, and it comes up in today's lesson, we do have those that will be saved, that will be born during the millennium. All right. And I was trying to figure something out, so I got smart. And here's what I did. I asked Siri, all right? I asked Siri this question. And I'll ask it again, all right? I'll tell you the answer, because Siri doesn't understand what I'm asking, because she or he didn't go to this study. So let me try it again. Here we go. All right, here we go. Siri, how many people have lived on the planet Earth?
As of 2018, the population of Earth is 7,655,957,369.
Okay, Sarah, but you don't understand. That's the current population, all right? So that's kind of a neat number to know. So 7 billion, that's current population as of this year, all right? 7,655,000. That tells you right now if this takes place, right now, the effects will be, it'll affect over 7.5 billion people currently, because it's going to affect the church that is raptured, however many that is, and it'll affect those that are not raptured that stay behind, including Israel. All right? So, but my question was, how many people have ever been on this planet? Siri's not going to be able to answer that. I've tried all kinds. No, since the beginning of time and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, Siri goes, ask Mike, he knows. But Siri didn't say that. Yes.
Answer that.
Okay, answer.
I don't know if this, one time I had heard, it's been a while since I heard this, but there's been more people alive today than there
In of all of history. I believe I've heard that too. In other words, the current population as it exists, people alive right to now, are more than in history. So you think of all the people through the years and stuff like that.
It's bizarre to think that way, but
yeah.
a lot of people alive.
So if you double, you can say 14, 15 billion people have been on the planet. We'll get to that in a minute. But anyways, all right, so these are the people. So that was a good question, and I didn't have the answer for you then, and I don't have the answer for you now, but I would say we are a witness, we are a testimony, whether or not we actually witness to the people or not. I would think so. I would think these that are born during the millennium will need to be witnessed to, and we'll see why as we get into these last scriptures. Okay? All right, we ready to move on? Sure, good. Okay, verse 7.
Mike, here's
Yes.
one more that the Google's better than Siri.
Oh, okay.
They said there's been 107 billion people.
Yeah, mine's where I agree.
What?
Yeah.
Currently 7 billion alive today, and there are 107 billion have already died.
Mine says that only since they've started doing, they only started
Census.
keeping on a national level birth rate since 1902. So even before they ever put down when they were born or if they were born. So you don't have to keep record of it.
Might be a little crowded.
It may be crowded, that's right. So get your tickets early. We got group rates flying and everything like that. All right. All right. That's just a thought, Sandy, because, well, hold that thought. We'll move on past that, all right? I didn't mean to throw that out there so soon. But let's listen to verse 7. Who wants to start us out tonight? Verse 7. Satan's doom. All right, Wanda's got it. Chapter 20, verse 7. She thought she was ready. All right, here we go.
When the 1,000 years are over, Satan will be released from his prison.
All right, stop right there. So when the 1,000 years are over, so we see that the first 6 verses of the chapter, when it talks about the millennial reign, it just says, how many times? 5 times. Now this is the 6th reference in this chapter to the 1,000-year period. And so it clearly says, now when the 1,000-year is over. So that this is a clear distinction. To me, it's just as clear as this 7-year period right here. It's just as clear that this is a distinct time. This has not come to an end yet. The church age has not come to it. So right now we know it's been 2,000 years, roughly, a little bit more, but about 2,000 years. When the rapture takes place, then we can put it in the history books and say this was 2,014 days or whatever, 14 years, whatever it is, okay? Just as we can count backwards and say 4,000 years history prior to that. So when the 1,000 years is over, this happens, all right? So we're coming all the way. Again, having to take in mind what all we talked about last week and all the possibilities and all the scenarios and everything, whatever this period entails and whoever is involved and whatever it looks like at the end of the 1,000-year period, and by the way, I would take that as a literal 1,000. I mean, to the day time, 1,000 years. There's no reason to think it's just roughly 1,000 years. It's just a time, a millennium set in time's history, in God's time plan that is 1,000 years. Whatever it looks like at the end of that 1,000 years, this takes place at the end of that 1,000 years, and it changes everything. By the way, remember we have a tendency to kind of say that, you know, the rapture happening, the chaos beginning, going into the tribulation period, that's going to be so chaotic, especially at first, that it's in some sense, it's going to seem like the end of the world. Well, it seems like the end of the world, but then we really think of the end of the world, some people think of the end of the world as Battle of Armageddon. Oh, it's the end of the world. It's Armageddon. That's the end. Well, this is not the end. This is not the end. This is just 7 years from this. So this is not the end. This is not the end. It goes into 1,000 years. And guess what? This is not the end either. So this is not the end of the world, but it is the end of this planet and all that kind of stuff. So when the 1,000 years is over, we're going to keep discussing about that. But when the 1,000 years is over, the devil is released from where? From his prison. Where is his prison? Okay, here's his prison, because he was chained up and put there last week, right, by an angel. So the angel locks him up, and he is here. What's that?
Sealed it over.
Sealed the door. He chained him up, threw him in there, locked it, sealed it, and it's a done deal. So he was there for 1,000 years. Have you ever been trapped somewhere? Or when you get untrapped, if someone locks you in a room or something like that, and boy, when you get out, you're Spitfire, man, you know, that kind of thing. Imagine 1,000 years locked up, all right? 1,000 years locked up. That's got to be torment for him, and he is ready to wreck the place when he gets out. Okay, so he gets out of his prison at the end of 1,000 years. This is a reminder to me and to you that God is always in control. of Satan. He is now as well. God is always in control of Satan, and He is always in control of this world. If He were not in control of this world, we couldn't plot a chart like this. There's no way. It'd be so messed up, so chaotic and taking turns and all that kind of stuff. And yet this stuff that's been prophesied, that we can talk about this set in stone period of time when we're in the world that we live in now, and there's been the times past, like in Noah's day and all those kind of things, just tells you God's in control. He's always been in control. He's always working this direction, and He's always moving towards His goals, and He's going to accomplish it just exactly like He said. He didn't have to come out with a revised version and say, well, because I didn't expect that to happen, I had to do something different. So God is in control. We need to always remember that. And because He is in control, when He could have done away with Satan, all right, you guys, when He could have done away with Satan, He didn't. He locked him up. And why did He do that? Because He had a purpose, didn't He? He had a purpose for doing that, or He wouldn't have done it. All right? And this purpose is what we're finding out here. That at the end of the 1,000 years, He is ready to be released again. All right? And He doesn't do it because He feels sorry for Satan. Does He? All right? He's just toying with him. Yeah, that'd be okay. But He's not. All right? So verse 8, we're going to kind of come into the purpose. Who wants verse 8? All right, Gene's got verse 8.
And I will go out to deceive the nations in the four corners of the earth. God and may God to gather them all for battle. In number they are like the sand of the seashore.
All right. The second part of that verse, I forgot to put a note in here for you, so don't let me forget that, all right? But it says right there, and I think when you read it, you said, and I will go, and the earth, it said He, right? And He will go, is that what yours said?
And will go.
And will go? Okay, so He's released from His prison and will go. He will go, and it tells His purpose. His purpose there is to deceive. Imagine that, Satan deceiving. Could we go clear back to the garden? That's how this mess started here on earth with sin, is because he deceived. All he had to do is deceive Eve. And then she carried that on, that deception carried that on to Adam, and we've been dealing with that ever since. And the final thing, when he's loose for 1,000 years, and he's probably thinking back to all he had accomplished over the 1,000 years of wrecking people's lives and wrecking the planet, trying to divert God's plan and all that, and yet he's bound. And then, do you think he knows that he's going to be released after 1,000 years?
I'm sure he does.
I don't know how he could not. He heard the story, whether he believes it or not, whether he really thinks this, God's going to stay true to that or not. He's heard that. This isn't some big church secret that we kept, made sure that Satan didn't come in when we talked about it. And so he knows that the story says he gets bound for 1,000 years and finds himself bound, and then he's loosed once again.
Aaron said he read the book.
He what? He read the book. Yeah, he did. He read the book, especially parts that talk about him. Oh, that's me. Okay. He read the book. When he's released, he's going to deceive again. 1,000 years didn't make him any smarter. All right? 1,000 years didn't give him time to think about what he did. Go sit in the corner for 1,000 years and think about what you've done. 1,000 years didn't make him anything other than what he is. He's a liar. He's a deceiver, a thief. Yes.
Didn't last week, didn't it say something about there was another shaft at the end of that hell where he's at? There was another shaft that was there for, I didn't get what the purpose of it was.
I remember we talked about something like that, but we're going to talk about the distinction between the bottomless pit and hell. That's where our discussion was last week. We're going to talk about that. But main thing is he was locked up, all right? He was locked up for 1,000 years. He's released and he comes back to deceive because that's all he knows how to do. He doesn't know how to do anything legitimately or honestly or openly or anything. He's full of lies and deception. And so he's overcome with that. And so we can understand his nature just like he understands our nature, by the way. And he comes to deceive. He comes to deceive who? It says he comes to deceive
all the non-believers.
all the non-believers. You can put nations right there, okay? The nations. He comes to deceive the nations. Now we know it's always been about deceiving the nations, right? We have all the major powers and all the nations throughout history, and he's always been deceptive. He's provided deceptive leadership and all those kind of things throughout the time. Certainly during this time, he's all about deceiving. He first comes on the scene through the Antichrist promising peace and everything. He's lying, he's deceiving. It's all leading to a point where he's going to demand that people worship him. And he's again deceiving, saying that he's God and you worship me as God, and all that kind of stuff that takes place here. All right? He gathers the troop at the very end, saying, we're going to get Israel once and for all. Even though he knows the story says, no, you're not. And sure enough, as he gathers the troop, we have the battle of Armageddon. Christ comes back just like he promised, just in the perfect time, to do exactly what he claimed to do, and that is to protect Israel and to do away with the kingdoms of this earth. And so he did that. But we still have the nations. Yes, Don?
I just going to say, this goes back to what we were talking about last week.
Yes.
That everyone has to make a decision. And from what I read here, it shows that people are not going to be making the right decision during this 1,000-year reign for this many people to be ready to rebel.
Yes, and let me fix to my notes right now if I'm coming to it, all right? We need to see, it is my notes, so let me say this, but you're right. When it's referring to this, again, you have to see there's a specific purpose why God didn't just do away with them at the Battle of Armageddon. This is glorious re-entry into the earth and everything. If you want peace, just do away with Satan. Just get her done. Remember, he threw the Antichrist and the false prophet in this bottomless pit. All right, they're the first two permanent residents here, okay? He threw them in there at that time, but not Satan. He just bound Satan, but did not throw him in the bottomless pit for forever. And so there's got to be that purpose. And he says, we don't have to guess, we don't have to read between the lines. He says he comes back. He's intentionally loosed by God in order to come back and to try to deceive the nations. All right? So who are the nations? Well, we got the nation of Israel still there, all right, the 144,000. There is a basic understanding that it is not unreasonable to think that the 144,000 that hid out in Petra and that they were coming for at the end of the Battle of Armageddon, that when it entered the millennium might live throughout the entire millennium, all right, 144,000 of them. We know that they're in their bodies. We know that there's no reason to think that they're not going to have children and children and children and children and children. In fact, if you think about this, we're talking about the world population. We understand birth rate, the rate of death, and all that kind of stuff right now. Imagine 144,000 plus maybe others, the other nations that go into the millennium, if there are in fact other nations, going into this time of perfect peace, of rest, just the best conditions. So far, and I don't know that I'd take it this far, but there's even the indication, there's a possibility that during this time there is no sickness. Not perfect health like in heaven, but the earth won't be plagued with cancer, with illnesses, and with all that kind of stuff, that stuff that came along with the curse. Now, this earth has not been done away with. They're still on this planet Earth, so I have a little trouble thinking that actually could be, but it could actually be, because Christ comes to reign. And if he wants to make it peaceful and restful and all that, without all that stuff that we're dealing with now, he sure can. But without the scourge of society going into the millennium. And by the way, we say that, and we talked a lot about, Paul, you brought up whether or not they could sin or would be tempted and all that kind of stuff. You think about it. Sure, we're still on planet Earth. Sure, these people are still in their body. But guess what? Who's reigning on this earth? Christ is reigning. We saw that reference where he's reigning with the iron scepter. And so this is his planet. This is his time. Satan has been taken out of the picture, and he has this time, setting time for a peaceful, restful 1,000-year period of rest. And that's when we have so many people. So think of the population of the earth, and that, well, it won't be 7 billion by that time, but those how quick they can replenish the earth. And someone brought it up last week, I think, during our discussion. Maybe Gene did. Noah and his family. It was just Noah and his wife and his 3 children and their wives, 3 boys and their wives. 4 families that repopulated the earth. And it didn't take millions of years to do that, all right? And so we have a million, we have 1,000 years in which for the population to explode. So we can envision a population explosion.
Now, you say that there's probably people on the earth, not just 144,000, that will be moving into this.
Yeah.
Now, they're going to be bringing old habits, old faults and possible old diseases with them. Is this 1,000 years gonna heal all of those people that might have had cancer, hadn't died yet, or had something that might?
I'm just gonna say, I don't know. I don't
You know
know.
what I mean?
Sure.
You say there's not gonna be any sickness, but if those.
Well, I didn't say there's
people
not
come
going to be
in,
sick, but I said there's indication that the situation that we are in now could change, because it's a peaceful time on the earth. Right now, it's not a peaceful time,
Right.
and the things that created there. So we can guess, but I'm just speculating like you as well. There's not scriptures that tell us those kind of details. There's some details that you can find in other parts of Scripture to kind of talk about this, but they're all just a lot of speculation. Okay?
Well, the verse that we just read says
Uh-huh.
that Gog and Magog number the
Okay.
sand on the seashore.
Exactly, okay, so Gog and Magog, number that. Okay, so that would not just be our original 144,000, we can count them, all right? They've had the roll call for that, all right? But we go into the 1,000-year reign right here, we have this population right here, that population explosion. And so every single one of those that are born during that time have to be tested. They have to be tried, they have to make a decision. Here's one thing I found in notes, and did I put it in your notes? Eliminating sin is not as simple as changing our environment. That's what I was getting at. Our environment is going to be changed, whether it's perfect or not, or completely without sin or temptation. But anyways, it is drastically changed, all right? It's a peaceful, wonderful, healthy environment. But simply changing our environment is not enough. The nature of man's heart is rebellion, which is why you must be born again. And just like we have to be born again, and just like these 144,000 had to be born again, and they got born again during the early part of the tribulation, all right? They got born again, and they made it through the tribulation. They must be born again. They're not going to just be allowed in because they have great-great-great-great-grandparents that were part of this original group, all right? And so they have to be tested. So that, again, fits and understands this purpose why God had to use Satan, knowing what he would do, had to use him chose to use him one more time in order to allow them to be tested, to be tried. And that's what's happening. And they will have to decide for Christ at that time. The fact that it says he gathers Gog and Magog. Now, Gog and Magog are equivalent in this use of the scripture. I can't completely break this down for you, but again, it can get a little bit iffy on understanding it. But the Gog and Magog represent all the ungodly nations in the four corners of the earth that oppose the people of God. James Vernon McGee says that this is not the same Gog and Magog that are referred to in Ezekiel 38 and 39. When it talks about Gog and Magog, those same terms, we're talking about this incident when I was talking in the Old Testament about Gog and Magog, and there's some references there to actual princes and people and that kind of stuff. And again, it's talking about ungodliness and some of that stuff in the Old Testament. But it says that Gog and Magog, they gather here, the gathering of the nations, Gog and Magog at the Battle of Armageddon are one thing. Those are troops, those are people that can be numbered, or those are those nations. But what I see here, what I'm reading, what I understand here is that this Gog and Magog is a reference to, it's related to the Gog and Magog of Ezekiel 38 and 39. It's related to these armies that gather in the last day for the Battle of Armageddon. But it's really just synonymous of that when it's talking about this. Gathering nations, it's just saying gathering the ungodly people all over the face of the earth. The four corners of the earth. So the Gog and the Magog are references to all those people that are scattered all over the earth. Which remind us, all right, that they are scattered. They do go everywhere on the earth. They don't just all stay there and huddle in the Holy Lands in Israel, although that still remains a significant place. All right? So he gathers them together. Who is he gathering? Those that he deceived. And they say, yeah, let's form us an army. Let's do this. And let's go to do what? To kill God's people again. To come against God and come against his people once again. So here they come. Here they come. He's released. He gathers it. This is not a long period of time. This is just, these people apparently somewhere along the line have said, I'm not buying it. Okay, so Jesus is ruling. Remember, Jesus was on the throne, God was on the throne, and all of the glories of heaven, with all the perfect angelic creation, or good angelic creation, is the same, at that same time as when Satan, Lucifer, decided against God. In his very presence, in a perfect place, without sin, without any other influence, his heart turned, his angelic heart, as best as we can understand that. And so did the legions that followed him. So in that perfect setting, there was those that went against God, just like in this wonderful, peaceful thing, there will be those that even though they live in the best time on earth, outside of maybe the Garden of Eden, which was just Adam and Eve, living in the best time, have all the great influences, has the redeemed church and all the saints of old, has Israel restored to their rightful place and position, and yet their hearts still have to choose. And you get generation past generation, you get further removed. So that's when he sends Satan to deceive the nations once again. I just have to tell you, when I first started studying this decades ago, all right, literally, I just thought, well, that's just symbolic. He just comes trying to deceive. But here it says he gathers them from Gog and Magog. And then when you understand the population during the millennium, then you understand that he's got plenty to choose from. He's got plenty of people to try to deceive. He only had 2 people to deceive here, right here, and he got to one of them. And look at what happened. All right? So he comes there, and these are people that have never been influenced by Satan. These are people that have never experienced the evils of this world that we have for 6,000 years. And these people, apparently, if that's the way we're to understand it, choose against God at that time, which means they never were saved. Christ was reigning and ruling on the earth, and they didn't get outside of the boundary and influence of his reign. However, they still have to choose. That's really the only way it makes sense. Otherwise, why test them? If they're just automatically saved because they're living during the reign of Christ, and all of them just say yes when it's appropriate, then why loose Satan again? So it makes sense. This fits into God's plan. Janelle.
Could this be like the children of the people that took the mark of the beast, their children and their descendants? Or
Great question. Okay, good question. She said, could this be the descendants or even some of those who did take the mark of the beast? All right, let's put let's do our calendar here. I'll entertain that as a possibility because we have right here, the mark of the beast takes place just 3.5 years before Armageddon. 3.5 years. This is not going to be a birth explosion here. This is not a good time to have a family and start your family, okay? But what if there were a child born right here? Then the time it goes right here is you got a 2-year-old infant. Do you think that infant is going to be destroyed during the Battle of Armageddon? Remember, and that's where, again, we understand more that the Battle of Armageddon is to those armies that have gathered in Israel, the place I'm going here in a couple of weeks. In that valley where I'll be is where those armies will gather. And there'll be that bloodbath that's as deep as the bridle on a horse. But that's just the armies. That's not nationwide. It's not all over the world. That's right there near the Sea of Galilee, right there in the valley of Megiddo. Well, what about everybody else? Lots have been destroyed. I mean, we know all that have been destroyed down here. But that's where we're getting the nations. And so could it be that the children of some of these that have sold out to Satan and everything could be among those? I would entertain this as a possibility, yes.
I agree with you.
Don?
I agree with you. I just don't think that anyone who ever took the mark of the beast will enter into that.
Absolutely not. That's right. Yeah, we're not saying that. That's what she said. She said the children of those, right?
Yeah.
So yes, there'll be women and children. They weren't a part of that army. They're minding their own business in a horrible time on the planet Earth, but they're not those. And I don't know that nobody that has taken the mark of the beast would be able to go into the millennial reign. So we have to entertain the idea that, and the Bible doesn't clarify this, that on the face of the earth there are many that are never forced. All right? Satan is not omnipresent. Remember, in this part, he is confined to the body of the Antichrist man. All right? So he's not all-seeing and all-knowing like God is. So he doesn't know who's hiding in the hills there, and he doesn't know who's on the other side of the planet and stuff like that. And so we could talk about how that all fleshes out, all day long in just speculation. But we have to assume that if in fact the nations, the Gog and Magog that are being gathered, could extend beyond just the children of the nation of Israel to these people that have not taken the mark of the beast. Not necessarily saying they're saved, but maybe they were. Maybe they believed in God and they were never forced to say take the mark or be martyred. Those that are forced will be forced to choose, and those that don't believe, they won't take the mark and they'll be martyred. If they're caught, if they're forced to do that. And that'll be happening all over the planet. All right? So, I'm getting back into this stuff right here. But we're trying to get a hold of who Satan is coming to deceive in that last time.
Let's say the people who took the mark of the beast were not in the millennial reign.
Right.
So they're not at the actual battle.
Right. Yeah, the battle...
They just drop dead? Or boom?
Yeah. I don't know. When Christ comes, he harvests the planet. All right? So if he harvests the planet, he comes in the battle of Armageddon. That's the war that's being waged. But it comes that he harvests it. It's the great wine press. All right? Christ is all-knowing. So yes, he can take everyone who has taken the mark of the beast over the whole planet and at that time destroy them. And then who goes in there? Maybe just a small number, but those small numbers are the ones that also reproduce outside the nation of Israel that reproduce. I don't think we have to figure that out or prove that one way or the other to say that. Let's just entertain the possibility of those that we know will be there. Israel and their descendants, that those that will be born. That's enough. Even if there's nobody else, that's enough that they still have to give an account.
Children are uncountable. Uncountable.
Right. Yeah, and that's why I'm saying if there's any children that go in here, I don't see why God would just kill them. Now, if he did, if as I understood it one time, everybody's killed except the 144,000 in the story. That just was a lot easier for me to grasp, all right? If that were the case and he did kill children or he did end the life of children, everybody else on the planet, they would not be held accountable. They would be just like children now that died before the age of accountability, and they're not held accountable. All right, so that doesn't change any of that. We're not going to get finished if we don't get in here. Yes, sir.
I don't think it's so important who is in there,
Yeah.
but mankind is in there.
Right, we still have
Mankind is living in an environment where there is no evil, because Satan is bound. So therefore, they haven't been tested.
Right.
Now,
right.
when Satan is released, Christ is showing that mankind is evil.
Yeah.
They're wicked.
Because everyone that's born during this time still inherit the old sin nature. They're not any different. And so that's where we realize there are some there. However, those that inherit the old sin nature and are born during the millennium and live for the 1,000 years and multiply again and again and again, all right, they still have to decide.
Adam and Eve had to be tested.
That's right. However, they still are in a great environment, so the influence, the drive is going to be more prone to accepting the reign of Christ, accepting the examples that they have without all the negative influence. So it's not identical situation to what we're living in now, but the heart of man is still the same, of those men are still the same. Let's move on, all right? Let's go to verse 9. Yes?
Okay, I was going to tell you, verse 9 is going to explain something.
Okay, then let's go to verse 9. Read verse 9. She's ready to go. Read verse 9 for us then, all right?
You want me to read it?
Sure.
Okay. They marched across the breadth of the earth and surrounded the camp of God's people, the city he loves. But fire came down from heaven and devoured them.
All right. So again, they marched, all right? We have Satan being loose. By the way, there's no indication, I've never heard or seen any, unless you see it there and I don't, that anyone except for Satan is loosed. The one individual, Satan, is loosed, all right? Not him and his armies and his legions or anything, all right? Satan is loosed. And he, singular, goes to gather them who are Gog and Magog, the evil nations that exist in that time, and they march on to Israel. Remember during this time that Jesus he's reigning here on the earth. He reigns over the entire earth, but Jesus reigns from Jerusalem. That is still the main place. That's still his city. It says where? They surround God's city. What is that? Jerusalem. All right? Those that have been deceived and are now following Satan, in this moment in time, this brief moment in time, they march from all over the planet to that very same spot, close to where this happened as well. All right? This didn't happen in Jerusalem, but not that far from it. All right? And so they gather again, and if Grand Central or Central Station or whatever the key place is, Jerusalem, they're coming, and it says, coming to that holy city once again, where God's people are gathered, and they're coming. And what happens? Fire came down. All right? So they surround the city of Jerusalem, and fire comes down. Jesus is reigning from Jerusalem. God's use of the fire should remind us not to harm the things that God loves. He loves Jerusalem. That's why we should pray for the peace of Jerusalem. That's why when you hear anti-Semitism, thank you, I had it right there and it mumbled up, all right? When you hear about that today and you think, oh, not everybody's supportive of the Jews and we shouldn't or whatever kind of stuff, don't mess with God's people. Don't mess with God's holy land. Don't mess with God, because He's got a plan, and that plan exceeds all the plans of any other city, any great nation or anything, and even at the very end of the millennium is part of that. So, yes, they march on there, and so we kind of see that this is indeed an end-time army, similar maybe to this one right here, but a little bit different. These people that gather at Armageddon have had years. I'd even back that up to before the rapture. These armies that gather here, because that's only 7 years after the rapture, these people that are in these armies that die in that bloodbath at the end when Christ returns, they've been evil for a long time. They've been against God for a long time. Whereas here, Satan, he's loose for just a moment in time. We don't have anything of the duration. It doesn't say a day, a week, a month, a year, I don't know. But it just indicates he's loosed. He deceives them, they march, and that's the end of it. Fire comes down. Don, were you going to say something?
I was just going to say it's interesting because when the millennium starts, it says that there will be no more war, and all of the instruments of war are made into plowshares and things like that. So there will be no weapons.
Right.
Unless there's a period of time there where they could build them, or they're coming with clubs or something. So
yeah, it's just a strange dynamic. Again, we don't have any details, so we're speculating. I don't want to spend too much time there. But you have to realize, when they are deceived right here, yes, the war is done away with. We don't have countries that are taking powers. We no more beast with 7 heads with all these kings of the earth. No. But there are people all over the planet, apparently, that can be deceived, whose hearts are not for God, that will be deceived. And they're the ones that will come marching. And yeah, I'd say, there's a good chance that they're just coming body to body. I mean, they're just going to come. There's just probably a limited amount of people they're really targeting in Jerusalem, if they're coming from all over the world to do there. And so it's an interesting setup. And just like this is really not a battle, Armageddon, this is not a battle either. The fire comes down and consumes them. Go on to verse 10. Continues. What's that? Gog and Magog are all the ungodly nations. That's a reference, not necessarily. Gog and Magog, you may hear, oh, that's Russia, or that's this. And so when you look at the Ezekiel reference and you look at some of those things, you can pinpoint some nations and targets when it's talking about the Battle of Armageddon. But here when it says Gog and Magog, it's just a reference to ungodly nations that are on all spread all over the earth. So that's just a reference there, okay? Verse 10, and we'll get into our last section here. Okay, read.
And the devil who deceived them was thrown into the lake of burning sulfur, where the beast and the false prophet had been thrown. They will be tormented day and night forever and ever.
Okay, this is the moment, even though it's been talked about, been prophesied, been even celebrated up to this point, that this was going to happen. The day of judgment is coming, and Satan's doom and all that kind of stuff has been talked about already in Revelation, but this is the actual moment that happens. At the end of 1,000 years, at this deception, at this marching on Israel, a ball of fire, and this one that was once captured and bound is now thrown into the bottomless pit, where he will remain forever and ever and ever. Where the false prophet is, where the Antichrist is, will be right here forever. All right? No one else at that moment, just those three are there, okay? And that's in that moment in time, he takes Satan. Now, the armies are destroyed as well. These armies that are gathered from Gog and Magog. But the emphasis here on this scripture is the end of the deceiver, the end of Satan. And he will not be destroyed and killed, all right? That's the distinction we need to make when we talk about that. He will be tormented, okay, for all eternity, and never loosed again, and never have influence or anything. He will be here in this bottomless pit, the lake of fire, for all eternity, and be unending torment. Hal Lindsey made an interesting comment regarding this. He says, I'm sure this does not bring any joy to God's heart. Why would Hal Lindsey think that? Why would we think that God's not joyful that he finally destroyed that great, terrible enemy? Lynn, what do you think?
Because God created him.
Yeah,
It
he
was
did
his
it.
creation.
He created him.
He said the same thing after with Noah. He said he regretted it. He was
Yeah,
sad.
he had no joy that he had to flood the earth and destroy mankind. He loved mankind. We're created in his image. He finds no joy in this. I have to remind us of that, because when it first talked about this end time, when the Christ is going to come, said Christ is coming and it's the end of all that kind of stuff, like it was all over, and yet we said, well, it basically is all over, but it's not. Remember, there was a celebration in heaven, and everybody rejoiced, and all the martyrs rejoiced. Finally, woohoo! Well, we might be rejoicing at the end of Satan, but God's not. He said, that's Lucifer. That was my angel at one time. That was my creation. He was beautiful. Beautiful, angel of light. And so he finds no joy. I think I tend to agree with that too. So this is not a joyous celebration type thing, but it is a victory. It is the victory, and it is the end of what needs to come to an end, and he will have his end. All right, we got 12, 13 minutes. Let's go. The last section is verses 11 through 15, and it talks about the great white throne judgment. Boy, you don't know how long. It's taken us a year from Revelation 1:1. It's taken us a year to get to the end of this chart right here and get to the great white throne judgment. And the only reason I don't have too much problem saying, well, great, we got 10 minutes to talk about what we spent a year to get to, all right? The only reason that's not a problem is because we've talked about this so much. We've looked forward to that. We've talked about it when we talked about the judgment seat of Christ. We talked about when we talked about the judgment of the planet in Noah's day and all that. Let's do what I usually don't do. Let's read all 5 verses, but don't close your Bible. We got to cover all the stuff, all right? So who'd like to read 11 through 15 about the great white throne judgment? Okay, you got it, Steve. Good and loud for us.
Then I saw a great white throne, and him who was seated on it. The earth and the heavens fled from his presence, and there was no place for them. And I saw the dead, great and small, standing before the throne, and books were opened. Another book was opened, which is the book of life. The dead were judged according to what they had done, as recorded in the books. The sea gave up the dead that were in it, and death and Hades gave up the dead that were in them, and each person was judged according to what they had done. Then death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. The lake of fire is the second death. Anyone whose name was not found written in the book of life was thrown into the lake of fire.
In sin. All right, so lights go dim, and we end with that sin, all right? Again, not a whole lot of verses, not a whole lot of stuff to talk about what's really going on there. However, unlike the millennial reign that doesn't have as much specific, direct scriptures throughout the Bible, you can find plenty to talk about leading up to this point. One thing I want to say before I forget. Remember, I made a reference, and someone had once said that everything in the Bible, basically, all the Old Testament prophets, all the New Testament history, everything in the Bible, everything in Revelation, basically points to one thing. And what that one thing is all pointing to is this right here, the return of Christ. All right? So that's the biggie. It's the return of Christ. All right? This is not the goal. And so we think, oh, that's the goal, is to get us to the white throne judgment. No, that's just the goal of this study, so we can get to chapter 21, the end of 20, and go into 21. This is not God's goal. Judgment is not God's goal. That's not what it's all about. But this has to take place. Just like this decision time, this deception had to take place. By the way, I didn't refer to it, nobody brought it up, but just like this had to take place, and God said, wait a minute, before we take that next step, choose you this day whom you will serve. It's kind of like what happened, what we can understand maybe happened in heaven when Satan said, I'll be God. And he goes, no, you won't. And not in my heaven. You can't act like God in my heaven. And so he's going to cast Satan out. And others decided to follow. And God said, okay, angels, however millions of angels he created or whatever, choose you this day. Who will you serve? You're going to be like Lucifer, or you're going to stay here? And the majority stayed. but many multitudes left unsaved. So that was the decisive day to end all decisive days, just as this will be, okay? This not so much. We've talked about the decision day here. It's critical, but it's not like these cutoff dates right there. All right, so let's see what's there, okay? John sees, after he sees Satan and this stuff that happens to Satan, and then Satan's gone. Bye-bye, Satan, no more. You're gone, out of here. Then he says, immediately he sees a great white throne judgment. So this period is ended. It is completed. And now we go to this great white throne judge. If you can imagine, when I did the section that we talked about the judgment seat of Christ, and right over here I had a seat up on the table. We had some thrones around it because we had the 24 elders. And then we talked about the judgment seat of Christ, and we thought about Christ on his throne and us standing before judgment and our works being judged and all that kind of stuff. That's one incredible scene, but nothing like this. This is the biggie. This is the ultimate. This is the final judgment. It is appointed unto man once to die, and then the judgment. So we all have death. We all have judgment. So who is sitting on the throne? He said, I saw I saw the throne, and I saw he who sat on the throne. And who is it? It's Jesus. Okay. God is on the throne. Jesus is on the throne. He's on his throne. I found this scripture. I get scriptures on my computer, and last week I read them, and sometimes I save them, sometimes I delete them after I read them. This First Chronicles scripture 29:11 came up, and it's Old Testament. But man, when it said it, and I thought about this moment in time, when God is in all his glory, when Christ is reigning on the earth and everything. Yours, Lord, is the greatness and the power and the glory and the splendor and the majesty. For everything in the heavens and on earth belong to you. Yours, Lord, is the kingdom, and you are exalted as head over all. Man, that's a powerful scripture. It just fits perfect right here when God is on his throne here. All right. Real quick, it mentioned in that same verse in 11, it said, and earth and sky fled. Why did they flee?
From his presence.
What's that?
From his presence.
Fled from his presence, yes. But heaven, okay, in the beginning, God created what? The heavens and the earth. Was his throne room, the heavens where God was, did that already exist prior to that? Absolutely. So when he said he created the heavens and the earth, he didn't create the heavens where the angels are and where Lucifer fell and all that kind of stuff. He created the galaxies, the space, our atmosphere, and earth, and the solar system and all that, all right? He created the heavens and the earth. And it's that heavens and earth that he created here and then made a garden for Adam and Eve. It's that heavens and earth that after Satan is taken care of, then heaven and earth flees from him at the presence of the great white throne judgment. The way I put the answer to that, the reason the heaven and earth flee, to make room for the new heaven and new earth. All right? And we'll see that. That is in chapter 21, which we'll start next week. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. All right? So because we have a week difference, I didn't want to just leave that hanging. All right? Heaven and earth pass away. Why? To make room for the new heaven and new earth. And that is a new heaven and a new earth. God's throne room is still intact. Nothing changes there. All right? Verse 12 and 13, it says, the dead are all the unbelievers, fill in your blank. The dead that's referred to in verse 12 and 13 are the unbelievers. And this is called the second resurrection. Talked about those that died, but it talked about them. They were brought. These are the people that are here. All right? The souls that are here, they're in Hades. Hades is a temporary place. Just if you think of Hades, think of the bosom of Abraham. It's a temporary waiting place for Old Testament saints until Christ died and redeemed us. All right? This is a temporary place. It's death, it's torment, it's hell, it's fire, all that kind of stuff as well, but it's not the bottomless pit. The non-believers of all time, including all those that are destroyed here, all those that took the mark of the beast, all those that rejected Christ, including all those that came from Gog and Magog at the very end that were deceived. All of those are here, and in this moment of time are resurrected. That's the second resurrection. And the first resurrection is this one, the rapture of the church. The first of that resurrection was Christ, who was raised from the dead. He's the first fruit of the resurrection. But this is the first resurrection. But they're not the only ones that were a part of the first resurrection, were believers that were raised as well. And so the first resurrection is always the reference to those resurrected Their bodies are resurrected, they're given glorified bodies, and they reign forever in glorified bodies. The second resurrection is this resurrection is a bad thing, the resurrection of body, once again, to stand before the judgment seat of Christ. Now, let me fill in the blanks, and then I want you to see a visual, all right? It starts talking about books, and for us to understand the people and the spiritual condition and these that are raised, the first resurrection and the second resurrection, he takes us to the library. Y'all ready to go to the library? In the library, it says books were opened and a book was opened. Books were opened and a book were opened. Books are one thing, the book is the other thing, all right? So, what is the books? The books are what are written. It says, well, okay, let's deal with this book. We like this book, don't we? You know what this book is, don't you? What's it called? The Book of Life, the Lamb's Book of Life. What's in it? Big stories, cool stories about history and Bible verses. Just names. And whose names? Your name is in there. Steve Moody's there. Probably your middle name too. What's your middle name? Earl. It probably says Steve Earl Moody. All right? Just names of everyone who has accepted Christ. This is the Lamb's Book of Life. Okay, so that book gets open. See this? In this moment, in this time, at the great white throne judgment, even though we've already been judged. By the way, we've been judged and we stood before the judgment seat of Christ, but what group of people whose name is in this book have not stood in judgment to be judged yet? Remember, this happened right here, okay? We've been here, we've been in the judgment seat of Christ, but this nation of Israel has not. The martyrs who got saved after here have not. Those that accepted Christ during the millennium have not stood before judgment. So they'll be there. So once again, they're there. And guess what? Let me check. Yep, your name's there. Your name's there. So this book's going to be open. That's going to be a wonderful, glorious day to have your name written in the Lamb's Book of Life. All right? So that's one book. A single book, the Lamb's Book of Life. We receive the Lamb. But then it says books were opened. All right? This gets scary. All right? Theme song and everything. We got the Army fight song. You got the Marines here. All right, the Marines can't even take care of this. All right. Books were open. Now, in these books are not just names. All right. I'm going to use you as an example. We know your name is in the other book. According to your testimony, I believe you. All right. But if it weren't, then your name would be in this book. And you know what it would say?
What?
It would say Steve Earl Moody on such and such date did this, and did that, and did this, and the next week he did this, and the next month he did that, and behind his parents' back he did that, and he did this while he was a grown man, and he did this as a teenager, and this is the lie that he told, and this is the bank that he robbed, and this is the murder he got away with, but we recorded it, all right? Woo! How would you like to have
That wasn't me, oh Lord.
Listen, this is a multi-volume series right here, all right? And it's not good reading, all right? But that's what's opened up at the Great White Throne Judgment, all right? So that book of life gets opened up. Just need to know the name, all right? Just need to know the name. If your name's not in there, your name's in here, all right? And everything you've ever done, all right? Now, the clear indication from Scripture here is that the books that are read, that's how the people of the Great White Throne Judgment will be judged. The non-believers, the part of this that are a part of the second resurrection, all right? They'll be judged by their works. Where does that get them? Nowhere. It does not get them to heaven.
There's back down there.
That's right. That's right.
Detour down.
Okay. We've been studying the book of Galatians on Sunday mornings, and Paul tells over and over and over, we're saved by grace, not of works, not of works, not of works. We're not saved of works. But guess what? Our works are recorded, good and bad. And when we get to the end, even if we've done more good than we've done bad, all you have to do is one sin and you're condemned. Sin is sin. Once you sin, you've fallen, you've died spiritually, and unless you get saved, then you're not going to be in the Lamb's Book of Life. Therefore, you face judgment based on your merit. And And I don't care how sweet little old lady someone may be. I don't care how anybody has worked for mankind and saved lives in the medical field or done whatever, or ran into burning buildings and saved lives, or, you know, the greatest humanitarian or anything like that. What are we talking about? The heart of man. We know where that gets us, the heart of man. We can still, in the best of scenarios, we can still choose against God. And so our works will condemn us, all right? Christ came not to the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. Because if we're not saved through him, then we're relying on our works and no man's work. There are none righteous, no, not one. Not one. Out of all these volumes that will be opened up that day, there won't be go, oh, well, you know what? Guess what? You qualify. Welcome home, you know. Not a one, because the story will be told and they'll be condemned. By the way, we that don't have to deal with that, we're just glad our name is written in there. Our works had to be tried and tested as well. We talked about that at the Great White Throne, or at the judgment seat of Christ. But this was not for salvation. That wasn't for salvation. That was just for reward or whatever. So our works got judged too, but our salvation was already determined. Guess what? This right here, this is not a judgment for salvation, because no one's getting saved. It's not to see if you're not saved. We know that because your name's not there. All right? If your name's not there, you're not saved. All right? So this is a judgment on your actions, on your work. The wages of sin is death. The wages of sin is death. The wages of sin is death. That's the wages of sin. All right? No matter how much good you do to override it, what you earn because of a single sin or a life of sin is death. That's what will be judged there. Let's finish the book. All right? In this description, I'll give you some other references there. By the way, some cool references if you take the time just to read them. Remember the letter to Sardis? No, you don't. But in the letter to the churches, when he was talking about these churches during the church age, and it wrote to Sardis before the rapture, as a reference there, it talked about the book of life. There's some references in the following chapter, chapter 21, verses 27. If you'll read that, it talks about this Lamb's book of life as well. If you back up to chapter 17, verse 8, and chapter 13, verse 8, you'll read about the Lamb's book of life. And if you go to Philippians chapter 4, verse 3, you'll find reference to the Lamb's book of life. So this library is in Scripture, all right? And when it talks about who's being judged, it gives a reference there that's worth calling out. It said the dead. And where did they come from? They came from the sea. They came from death, and they came from Hades. Real quick, what is that? Have you ever heard about someone buried at sea? All right. This is the grave. All right. This is the grave. From dust you came, to dust you'll return. Okay. So our bodies die and go to the grave. But if you're out at sea, guess what? You may not be in a grave somewhere. You may not even be in the earth. You may be in the sea. So there's no forgotten part, whether you're in the grave or the sea. So you got the sea. You got the grave, you got Hades. Where's this Hades? This is the physical death. Hades is the temporary waiting place. Why are they there? Just like the rich man and Lazarus, all right? That reference there, that rich man, for 2,000 years plus, he's been there saying, one of these days, this old body that's in the grave will be resurrected along with my soul that is still alive, but in a spiritually dead condition, will be resurrected to stand judgment, and he will fail. That rich man will fail. And all the rest of them, they're judged, and then they are cast in this bottomless pit as well. Before I forget to make reference as well, remember when it said heaven and earth are passed away, all right, for a new heaven and new earth? We have to believe this right here goes with the old. It goes out with the old. It's gone. It's not going to be a part of our new heaven and new earth. There's not going to be a hell and a Hades and a grave and death. None of that exists anymore in the new heaven and new earth. All right? They'll judge by the word where it said that. Verse 14 gives one other neat indicator or thing right there. Not only are the people judged and cast in the bottomless pit, but it says death and Hades, this temporary place, are done away with. This place, this temporary place right here, was done away with 2,000 years ago. There was no reason for anybody to have to wait for Christ to come and redeem. Therefore, from this moment on, to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. And so this is done away with. This is a temporary waiting place. Once the great white throne judgment, it is done away with as well. And all there is is the bottomless pit, and all that's done away with the old heaven and new earth. So death and Hades are thrown in the lake of fire. They go down here as well. No more death. No more hell. All right? And then I ask the final question, verse 15. What book are you in? What book are you in? All right? By the way, once, as I understand it, all right, once your name is written here, you don't have to worry about your name over here anymore. Okay? Your works will be judged here. Our works will be judged here, but we're not judged like these people will be judged. It didn't talk about the books being opened there. Okay?
What works,
Oh, right.
about the people judge, you say we take it to heaven by our work.
Right.
What works is, what reward.
We're walking. This is for rewards, judgment seat of Christ, but not this. When we're right out here, he's not going to say, well, Joe Bob, I'm going to condemn you, but I will give it this. You did help a lot of people along the way. Good for you. Here's a little crown on your way to hell, you know. That doesn't happen, all right? So this judgment is not for rewards like the judgment seat of Christ. It's not given to us, given account. But we know that what our destiny is already. Out of time. Yes, Wanda?
What is the answer right here on that big long
The
line?
big long line, I just said, what is the purpose of Satan is to test the nation, to test those that are born during the tribulation. Why is Satan loosed? To test those that are born during the tribulation. It's all that discussion we had that fit into God's plan. Any other, do we fill in all the blanks?
What's the answer, 12 and 13?
12 and 13, the dead are all the unbelievers. When you talk about those dead, it's talking about the unbelievers that are here in hell and in the grave. Those that killed at Armageddon, those that are killed right here. All the unbelievers of all time. And that's called the second resurrection.
I had that on my first.
You had the second one. Okay, good.
Give
Second.
the answer
Okay.
already. 9 and 10.
9 and 10. The surrounding of God's city, that's Jerusalem. And then fire came down. And 10, Satan is doomed for eternity. And then you torment. I'll give you those blanks. I need stuff out here that says that. All right. We done? I hope that made a little bit of sense. All right. I tell you, this right here, I wish we could have just spent our whole time talking about this. This is a pretty phenomenal event. This little trip to the library right here. All right. Trip to the library. Let's be out here. By the way, before we leave, I got to give you a good word. All right. A good news. I got a text from Dina Key. And she sent me a picture. That's not a picture of Gary. It's a picture of biscuits and gravy. All right. But Dina Key says, Clifford, you'll want to hear this. Clifford, you'll want to hear this about Gary. Dina says, I had to laugh because I'm always trying to get Gary to not eat certain foods. And then she showed me that picture of those biscuits and gravy. This is what he had for breakfast in the hospital. This is what they served him. What do I know? He is better, may come home Monday, thankful for all the cards and the prayers from the church. So, he's not out of the woods, we know that, but God's seen him through, so keep praying for him as well.
It can be done.
What's that?
It can be done.
It can be done, absolutely, absolutely. So, it's not done until God says it's. All right, well, let's be out here. Nathan, would you dismiss us in prayer?
Thank you so much for this time, especially thank you, Lord, for those that you've given us to learn, to study, to know how to live life here, Lord, and to see you one day. I just thank you for the life and his diligence and studying and holiness the doors. And I just pray you would be with him, with his ministry, that he is prepared to go on a journey far away. You would just bless his life and you would protect him and keep him safe. Even those people that are ready, Lord, to hear about you, and I pray that these souls would be saved. Just pray for anybody here, Lord, that you would just go with us, protect us, guide us, Lord, give us wisdom